Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. I have no idea whether we've started or not because that took forever. I keep saying this at the beginning, but you, dear viewer, don't realise that the going live button sometimes takes more than a minute to happen. But anyway, here we are. So far in the house, we have Louis over there in Western Spain, or Portugal, whichever way you want to put it, and Nigel King and Rory Paul in the US. And I bought, there's not been a lot happening this week. But what has happened to me down here is I've had lots of people, not lots of people, a couple of people asking me about crop spraying drones and stuff like that. And Rory Paul is our resident ag. Well, he's my go-to ag guy to speak about those, anything ag. And Rory, have you got an opinion out there in the Great Plains of which you live of 10 kilo loads at a time in crop dusting? What do you think of it?
Okay, so I've always got an opinion, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try and be positive. I think that spraying is a very good idea. Conceptually, I think that in very small agricultural settings, a few dozen acres, a few dozen hectares, high value crops, difficult to get to fields, it makes sense. It also makes a lot of sense with much bigger UAS, manned aircraft size systems at some point, I think will go that way. It'll be automated. But right now you see a proliferation of relatively expensive multi-rotor systems, most of them electric, one or two of them emulating the Yamaha RX system. But 10 kilograms of media to spray on a couple of hundred acres is just not a practical approach. The other problem is, specifically here in America, is usually the entities that are responsible for spraying are not the same entities that are responsible for regulating flight. So, for example, here we have the FAA, and you can go out and get your 107 and go and operate a UAS. But to apply media from the air, you have to be compliant with the EPA. All right. And the last time I checked, nobody had actually gone through this process of being compliant with the EPA's requirements for aerial spraying using UAS. That's not saying that it isn't being done. I'm sure a lot of people out there testing on small plots, etc. So if you're thinking of getting into aerial application, you have to comply with your local agency that controls your UAS activities, and you're probably going to have to comply with the equivalent of the Environmental Protection Agency to go out and spray. Then from another practical aspect is you have to identify the problem in the field, right? So you're going to go out and map the field. You're going to see your weeds. And I think it was last season, Gary, that you tried to do crop counts using, what was it, Phantom?
Yeah.
And we kind of learned together, because I thought it was relatively straightforward with, drone deploy and precision hawk, etc., that to go out and identify those issues in the field. And then you're going to have to pass that information across to your spraying unit. And then you're going to have to have RTK level accuracy, because you can't have a 15-foot error. So that means RTK in real time, going out there to do that. So if you don't have some kind of correction service, etc., you're going to have a real problem on known coordinates. So while I think there is application, and there will be application in the future, I don't think that the current systems out there in the market are going to live up to the hype. You're going to go and spend your $17,000 to go and buy a unit, $20,000 to buy a unit. And at the end of the day, if you've got a couple of thousand acres or a couple of hundred acres, it's just going to be a total waste of time.
It would take forever to do, wouldn't it? What in America, would you happen to know what would a hectare, an acre cost with a crop duster to
I honestly don't know what that is, okay? But, if you drive around the Midwest, it is really, really common late in the season to see crop dusters out spraying for pesticides, not herbicides, but pesticides late in the season. And usually that is kind of a one-stop shop. You go to your crop protection company that's selling you chemical, they've already got some kind of contractual agreement with a spraying company, and it's a couple of telephone calls, and they're going to spray your field. Highly efficient, covers a lot of acres very quickly, very efficiently, and to use a small multi-rotor system at this time and comply with the FAA, keep it under 55 pounds, it's just, I think the activities are going to be in the realm of experimental crops, things like that.
Or gardening.
Or gardening.
I was at the launch of the DJI Agris here, and the farmer on the field where we were, he told us straight away that would never be able to do any kind of useful cropping or application of any kind of product, because it flies for a very short time, and the load is very only 10 kilos and 10 or 15 minutes flying. It's not good enough for any kind of good extensive agriculture. Not speaking of those huge wheat fields that you can see on US. Yes, that. And it's more a curiosity. What I like to see was on the DJI was the customization they did around their controller, so that they would make it one, weatherproof, and the most foolproof controller that I've seen on a drone. It was really targeted at someone that does not want to know how to fly a drone. Very automated stuff and very easy to operate.
Well, that's got to be a good thing. And would that tend? So you mentioned RTK and stuff like that, but if you got to the point where the thing could see, using vision, and see a problem with a particular plant and apply whatever, make that 10 kilos go a long way, rather than just the crop duster is boom, isn't it? The whole field, everything in the way. Would DJI be moving to that sort of point, do you think? Are they beginning to play, and all these players with these machines beginning to play and getting ready for that point where, you could be a bit more precise? Maybe you'd have 5 kilos of one thing and 5 kilos of another thing. I don't know, where do you see it going?
I can see a future that is even scarier. So what a lot of the companies that develop seed and genetically modified crops are exploring RNA technology. So you can basically have a plant in the field that is pre-programmed to respond to certain environmental factors, and you trigger that releasing a biological agent in the field, a few grams. And so let's say that you have a section of the field that's not responding to a fertilizer, or you dry in that field, or there's water. You spray it with a biological agent that's a couple of grams, and all of a sudden it infects this plant, and the plant actually now responds by triggering that built-in mechanism to deal with the drought or the saturation or the pest, etc. And that would take a few grams of product to be sprayed.
I wish I hadn't asked. I really wish I hadn't asked.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I can't unhear that, can I?
No. It's pretty scary.
Anyone want to pick
Goodbye,
that
vegans. Goodbye, vegans.
Was anyone else want to pick up that ball and run with that? I think that's pretty. Well, then the machines are perfect size. If that's the way we're going, surely.
Yeah, listen, there are other applications, and here's a freebie for the guys, the venture capitalists that are out there looking for it. Mosquito control in urban areas. Okay, these machines could be really good at getting to places where there's standing water and vegetation around that standing water that you can't get to with your truck or your guy with a spraying pack. Especially in the developed world. So here in America, we've got Zika virus and West Nile, etc. And you've got a lot of houses, and you've got retention ponds, and the ponds are in the backyard. You take your drone, you go up and you fly, and you put a chemical agent or a fungicide, whatever, herbicide down and deal with mosquitoes. So there has been work done on that. It's not a new concept.
And our friend above and beyond there's mentioning tree planting, and that tree planting is an interesting one. There's been two two companies stood up very keen to do that, and I can't get them to respond. Well, obviously, they would never respond to me, but they won't respond to me. And I've seen no actual proof or evidence that they've done anything that they've claimed to have done yet. So I think the tree planting is a great idea, and it has the whole sort of. And I might bring Nigel in on this because Nigel's very much into the mapping things. That's what his drones do. But it brings the whole ecosystem in. You map the area, you look for the problem, you then adjust accordingly and plant the plants, and then you continue mapping the area with one of Nigel's wings to monitor what has happened and is happening. So they've got the whole drone ecosystem in their bids, these people. But has anyone actually seen a drone plant a tree and seen? We should be in year 3 of some forestry if that's really happening.
But how do you plant a tree? For me, it's just a seed like any other seed.
Well, the idea is,
it's not planting a grown tree from a incubator. You have, for instance, what you have here are incubators that plant the trees up to a predetermined size, and then you pick up the tree with the earth around the tree and go and put it on wherever it is. And it's something that it's very up to date here in Portugal, because we had those crazy wildfires in the summer, and we have a huge problem of reforestation going underway, because we need to redo the forest that was burnt. And what I think is that either you go with the small trees, and not this small, but 1 meter, 2 meters high, and plant them on the ground, and they have hundreds of people doing that because they planted at predetermined distances, or then you just do a wild spraying of the seeds and hope they germinate.
Well, that's what these people are. What's one? I think it is seed drone. I think that's one of the major ones. So that is exactly what they're advocating doing. But monitoring that, but clearing it, finding an area of land and clearing the area of land using drones to build up maps of how it looked before and then changing it. Having all the bits. Every vendor has a chance in this. All the little bits of there.
We go back to do we need a drone to plant trees on our backyard?
Of course we do. We're from Silicon Valley. A drone must be used for every single possible thing.
Yes. You're sure? Oh, sorry, Gary. You're right.
Hey, come on. Come on. Get with the program, Louis.
See, I was flying an helicopter, and I got myself an haircut.
Very good.
And beard too. on different days.
Bruce was flying near several helicopters. G'day, Bruce. I haven't said hello to you. How are you, mate?
Yeah, g'day.
You're still there?
One thing on the seedling. Yeah, I saw something a little while ago. We do a lot of forestry here in New Zealand. I think it's the largest exotic forest in the southern hemisphere. And they had a drone which carried seedlings, which is what Louis is referring to, the little trees, not the seeds, but the seedlings, once they've germinated and grown to maybe 200, 300 millimeters high. And they were fitted on in tubes along the side of the drone, and it would fly over ground that had been prepared by basically ripping it up. And it would fire them like rockets into the ground, boom, boom, at regular intervals. So I got very good spacings. It could work with very, very rough terrain. And they could do like 100 seedlings in one pass and then refill. And it would actually save a lot of time compared to doing it and be a lot safer than doing it with a whole lot of men in the field with a backpack full of seedlings and a shovel and a spade and having to wander over this potentially dangerous terrain. Because when they clear fell a forest here, they just leave all the scrap on the ground. So there's sharp bits of wood and trunks and all sorts of things poking up. It's quite a hazardous environment. So flying a drone over it and just shooting seedlings into the ground, the ripped up soil, is a much safer way to do it and more productive, quicker, cheaper.
Well, I'll have to look out for that. Yeah. But we'll get them on. We'll get them on, and we'll see. We'll see. Perhaps the New Zealand ones will be the first seed planting group that will dare to talk to us.
And Bruce will do a video shortly about using mini drones to plant one tree at a time.
No, the way I fly, Lewis, I prune them. I just prune them with my mini quad.
It is one of those things. Where did we wandered off from crop dusting then, didn't we? Rory, while I've got you here, how did the first Part 107? Do you have any thoughts on the first Part 107 growing season? How did it go this year? Was there an explosion of cash coming into drone operators' pockets?
No, definitely not. Definitely not into my pockets. Agricultural industry, and I've said this again, it's really flat, and it's going to continue to be flat as long as commodity prices are suppressed. They're down. That said, what we have seen is the reemergence of agricultural drone startups. So, we went through round one with Drone Deploy being an ag company, Precision Hawk being an ag company, all of these companies, and then they've segued into industrial and utilities, etc. Well, now we're seeing round two. And it's the same old again, except they've introduced some new buzzwords into their lexicon to get VC money. My favorite buzzword at the moment is blockchain.
Blockchain, yes.
I'm like, oh, okay, I don't understand that, but people have added that in, blockchain, chain and drones. And money is flowing into these companies. I've seen a couple of them get a couple of $1 million for doing agricultural analytics again. VCs have either got really short memories or people change or something. They're not doing their due diligence. But I mean, there were literally, 4 years ago, there were 10 companies in the agricultural drone bubble. Now, I don't know how many there are that are really making money. In ag, at least. Ag is...
Is it required for them to make money or just do sell good PowerPoints?
I hate to think, I've been at this since 2004, and I really think that there is a place for UAVs in the agricultural space, in the right format, the right packaging. If we had systems, the drone in the box that you can send to a farmer, and he can do a launch and recovery, and you can do the image analysis somewhere else. But you have to understand that at least here in America, with 90 million acres here in the Midwest, drones, and this is something for me that took a long time to understand. Small personal UAS are not really suited to cover that area and make a large-scale impact in agriculture. For that, we need either manned systems or we need satellite-based systems. And in America, that will become a hidden subsidy. If farmers decide that they need that data and they need that analytics, they'll press their politicians, and the USDA will supply them X many times per season with high resolution, high quality imagery that they'll do analytics on, and it'll be almost for nothing.
And who will do that? Who will do the analytics? Will the farmer do it, or will it be farmed off?
What you're going to do is they're going to farm it off. They're going to farm it off to people like Climate Corporation, like SST. All of these analytical companies will get hold of that data. It'll be kind of free open source agricultural data, and they'll run their analytics programs on it. And they'll supply their growers with that edge to maintain food security. This is a food security issue. Not that there isn't. Listen, I drove through central Illinois and Iowa at the end of last season, and growing up in South Africa, we've got silos with corn. You never see it. Literally, there was so much corn and soybeans, it was piled outside the silos in huge yellow mounds of corn. We have got so much product here. There's a glut, an absolute glut of corn. So right now, I don't think there's any real incentive, barring some kind of global environmental catastrophe in the southern hemisphere in Brazil, Argentina, etc., that American farmers are going to be really incentivized to adopt new technologies quickly. Okay, quickly. It'll take time, 10 years, okay, to do this.
Technology.
I believe the crop analysis will come up with another buzzword that VCs like, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And then you get those special algorithms, almost all done with the open source tools that will learn. Okay.
Not enough people have applied machine vision concepts to crop management. I think that in the interim, there's a lot of space there for machine vision, very fast fixed wing UAS flying low altitude, using RTK, using LiDAR, range finding, and mapping fields using machine vision techniques. I think that there's an opportunity there in the short term.
Yeah, but
blockchain, crypto corn, that's what you need.
Yeah.
Crypto corn, there you go, Chris.
Now the thing is, as you know, the thing with artificial intelligence, the way it's being done right now, you have to teach it a lot. So those big data companies, perhaps they already have the data required to start learning something and providing some answers.
Okay, so it depends on what resolution. Okay, so the USDA has got 30 years worth of multispectral information that they can go and do machine learning from. What I'm talking about is much higher resolution imagery. Okay, and to actually start using, as I said, much higher resolution imagery in the field. So this is more like crop scouting across the entire field, that kind of resolution of imagery. So it's a hybrid.
Yeah, you could have the Copernicus. Is almost my go-to when people mention satellite is the European Copernicus. You can have NDVI from that. It's only 10-meter resolution, but it's the entire planet every 4 days, and it's free. So every 4 days, the entire planet, not just your farm. So that's, I mean, at what sort of resolution does this start becoming more interesting to you, Rory? 10 meters, 5 meter, 1 meter?
Okay, no, so don't get me wrong. Okay, so it depends on the application. So for example, nutrient management, 10 meters is fine. Fine. Really? 10 meters? That's perfectly fine in a couple of 100 acres. What I'm talking about is different crops. So, for example, grapes, berries, row crops. And you literally almost fly that drone down the row and do like a side scan, okay, of that crop. And you could literally count grapes, almost.
I've seen that request from, the farmyards in Oporto Wine that are done on hilly sides.
Yeah.
And one guy was asking for a drone that would fly in the middle of the grapes and would be telling him wirelessly if it was time to go to that row to pick up the grapes, because they have to pick the grapes at that exact moment.
Yeah.
And that's a possible application.
Why wouldn't we put a rover with the sensors on a stick going up and down rows when you're going into that sort of? Why do we have to fly over it when we're getting down to that sort of level?
Okay, I can't speak for grapes. Okay, I can speak for the Midwest, that it's flat and it's muddy and everything looks great until you step into the field and you go down to your ankles. Although rover technology would be fantastic as well. I think we're going to see combinations. I kind of thought, how did I get into the agricultural drone business? I saw somebody in South Africa flying a gas helicopter with a 35mm film camera. But there was actually an instance earlier. It was an old Tom Selleck movie called Lassiter. And there were a bunch of bots out in the field and they were individually picking bugs off of plants. And we might see a future, at least of Silicon Valley, future that maybe that becomes the case. I don't know. Farming is highly automated as it is. Highly automated. It's not a huge manpower. So maybe you'll see a system where we can actually reduce herbicides and pesticides and have greater automation. But I think it's going to be a slow process. I don't think we've got the whole mapping issue sorted out. I mean, we haven't seen widespread adoption here in the US in the last 2 years since the introduction of 107. And I don't think we're going to see it. You don't see farmers running out and buying mapping systems. You simply don't see it. And when you start to run the arithmetic, because it's not even mathematics, run the arithmetic to offer this as a service provider, unless you're in high-value crops, it becomes cost prohibitive to go out there with your drone, okay, and go and map farmers' fields, because I'm not going to travel to Nebraska to go and map 160 acres for a couple of cents on the acre. It's simply not worthwhile. The farmer has to do it himself, or his agronomist that's going to be there.
And I think that's where these satellite services might, as the resolution increases, somebody will be sat in India or some other country in a similar way. They'll be pulling all that free data in, and they'll send you, Rory, a report, or even Bruce, or any of us, because it can be anywhere in the world. That's the thing. They're getting data for anywhere in the world. They'll send you a report. They'll say, this report costs $5, and we think you should do that in that part of your field, that in that part of the field, and don't worry about that part. And you'll end up with a bit of paper which you can make decisions on, and there'll be kind of binary options almost. I think. Well, sorry, Rory, after you.
No, there's this real misconception, and honestly, I also didn't really understand it when I got into this business, that the scale of agriculture here in the US, and how this lends itself to much larger systems doing different things. And I think that a lot of venture capitalists get beguiled. They get this kind of acreage number thrown at them, or this hectareage number, where these analytics companies go, yes, we're going to charge $5 an acre for analytics, and we're going to service this with drones. But to actually go out and field, I don't know, the thousands of operators that you will need to gather that information, no startup companies can actually afford that. You'd have to spend $100 million to get that. It's much more cost effective to go and get an airplane, buy a Cessna for $60,000 and put a camera in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, buy yourself an
Gary,
ultra.
can I chuck some thoughts in there?
Of course.
It's very quiet in the background.
I know.
Okay, so Iron Crest UAV, we're a manufacturer of fixed wing aircraft. Have been in the game for almost 10 years now, and we provide to agricultural, mining, and many other industries. And I concur very much with what you're saying about the way that the hopes and the dreams of drones for agricultural systems kind of grew, failed to mature, and we're now discovering really what the challenges are. The biggest challenge, as you've kind of mentioned, is the cost per hectare. Unless you've got very high value crops, then it's just not worth putting a drone into the sky. However, there's another side, which if I use one of our vendors in the Philippines, they've been using our systems for 4 or 5 years now, quite successfully, to map very large pineapple plantations. And we're talking like 45, 50,000 hectare plantations here. And the primary use there is where there is not satellite imagery because of continual cloud cover. And so they've gone, you know what, we like this, and they've rolled it on year after year because it is beneficial, but on fairly basic survey procedures. So mapping fields, mapping field boundaries. It's not so much looking at crop health, though because they're pineapples, you can actually see quite clearly when a pineapple or an area of pineapple is unhealthy, so that is beneficial. But some of the greatest benefits have come from mapping the terrain for irrigation channels. And what the benefit a drone has brought, particularly in the Philippines, is reduction of soil erosion by being able to build an accurate 3D model and remap their irrigation channels. They reduced the amount of soil erosion, let me get these figures right, from 140 tons per hectare down to 16 tons per hectare. Now, that is colossal. And that actually meant that area of plantation, which had a lifespan of between 5 and 10 years, now has an indefinite lifespan. So there are small areas where fixed wing drones still have an application. But I believe otherwise, there's a battle yet to be won in order to make it commercially viable.
Well, are we gonna keep that in the agricultural? Well, I suppose we have to, but I mean, isn't that more land management? I mean, immediately here in South Africa, Cape Town has a huge problem with water, and a really good use case for drones now is to go out and map watercourses in greater detail, start getting rid of helping the fight against invasive vegetation and stuff like that. I mean, there are use cases, but that's what am I trying to say? Are you dealing with a more traditional surveying problem rather than a pure agricultural problem?
Yes, I agree. It is more about land management than agricultural analysis, NDVI, stuff like that. Agreed entirely.
Yeah, well, we all know there's use cases, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But it's use cases against the hype, I suppose, isn't it? It's what the public sees, and then anyone that's been around this a while will go, yeah, that won't work. And it doesn't matter how many times you say it, people won't believe you, because look what the newspaper or the Farmers Weekly or Farmers News, whatever it's called in your country, is saying. It must be true, and it's just based on what vendors like you want to say. And of course, Nigel, you're a vendor, so you're perfectly able to just make up numbers. It's within your remit. Perfectly allowed. But your machines have been what I wanted to talk to you about, and you were amazingly quiet for like 28 minutes. It was high altitude stuff. That interested me no end. You've been in Mongolia, you've been flying, haven't you?
That's right. Mongolia, South America as well. We've been up to, not we, but our end users have been up to 15,000 feet and beyond. It's clearly been quite a challenge for us because we can't do any testing in our kind of local gardens around here to get to that kind of a height. The answer is yes. They have been flown quite successfully up at that height, and including PPK variants of the drones, and have been returning a 3 centimeter in X and Y and 5 centimeter in Z, which is really quite an achievement for PPK at that altitude.
Well, just forget the PPK and all that. Just flying a thing at 15,000 feet is quite high. I mean, all that nice stuff is nice, but I mean, do you upgrade the motors? Have you got a different aerofoil, or is it exactly the same airframe as you'd use at sea level?
We have designed what we call a high altitude wing section. So we take our standard Data Hawk and just slap these slightly larger wings on. We've actually found that the propeller is pretty much the same, though we offer a slightly larger propeller and give the people who are going to be flying it instructions on how to ensure that the motor is drawing the right number of amperage and the propeller is turning out at the right kind of a speed, so they can go, enough thrust is being produced to launch the aircraft. The aircraft does need to fly at about 10% higher speed in order to maintain its altitude and stability, and landing tends to be a bit faster. Always the challenge is to try and get the sky. So we've developed a very nifty little launch line that guarantees a successful launch every time. So we overcome challenges. It's taken us a couple of years to do it, but I'm glad to say we're there.
Are you talking about your crazy flicking a stick launch method?
No, we still have that, but we now have about a 5-meter bungee line, which somebody will kind of pull back in tension and then just release, and the aircraft zips off on that. It accelerates it to its crucial, I think it's about 7 meters per second in a second. So it means that every time, what a vendor needs is that every launch is successful, not 80 or 90% of launches, which tends to be with hand launches, they need every launch to be successful, and this kind of guarantees that one. And it's crucial, again, for the high altitude launches where there just isn't the lift.
People in England will be wondering what that means, the high altitude stuff, because you never know. But even here, and I live at 5,000 feet, if I go down and fly in the coast, it's like, it feels like I'm flying in treacle. It really does. It's the difference is quite amazing, and also the approaches and how long it takes to start, all those sort of things. So, what other exciting things have Quest UAV got coming up? Indulge me.
Well, the big one is, and this is the greater thing we're seeing is the PPK, the really high accuracy applications. We've got a very good receiver on there with our Septentrio Asterix receiver. I won't bore you with the details, but it is producing some stunning results, requires no ground control, and here we are managing to produce a very detailed survey over up to 1 square kilometre at a time. That's been a 2 to 3 year project to get to that standard. So we're there now, and that's going commercially. Plus, on top of that, we're now venturing more into the rental scenario.
You as well.
A little bit of fear and trepidation. Yeah, it's like entering the our crocodile's mouth, we feel.
But that's been a bit of a trend in the last couple of months, people renting systems out. Doesn't that just mean you haven't got enough work for your own?
No, there's definitely a growing market as there are more qualified pilots, more people who are used to their rotary systems, looking to expand, if only for a month or two, into fixed wing to do some surveys and just to test the water.
I have to jump in because I think every time I come on the show, I offer to sell dronerentals.com, which I own.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot that. That's right. You do own it, don't you?
I'm just going to write that one down.
Yeah, he owns it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he owns it. Well, but it's become a thing, Rory. I think I've put up 3 in the last month. I've put up 3 companies doing it. And well, how on earth do you? What am I stumbling to say? I'm stumbling to say, how on earth do you protect yourself from misuse by the end user?
I don't know. You know, I thought it was a good idea when I registered the domains. You know, I had drone rentals and drone rental. And I looked at, you know, what it would take, and just being here in the States, it's so litigious. I just decided I don't want to lose my house when somebody does something, and I was like, okay, it's not for me, not for me.
Rory, you're very wise. That's all I can say.
Well, Nigel, what are you going to do? Who are you going to call?
Yeah, the answer is it is filled with risk. All we can do is try and mitigate that through terms and conditions, through the right preparation, through ensuring that they are trained to the standard that we require, and saying, hey, if you break this thing to little pieces, you'll end up buying it. That really is the top and bottom of it. It's fine for us. We're in UK, so if we're doing it to UK companies, that's not so bad. But we're trying to expand this across Europe and to the States. And we have 1 or 2 interested potential customers in the States. And we are, trying to find our way around it. So it's a win-win at the end of the day.
So what would I do if I wanted to hire something from you? Would I have to come and undergo factory training with you? And so you get to see me first?
If in UK, yes, you come to us. Where you are, we would try and find. We'd look at the qualifications you already have. What experience do you already have? We'd then go, have you got the correct licensing in order to fly, and potentially try and get you to hook up with an accredited fixed wing trainer in South Africa. Then we go, okay, let's open the gates and send something over. It's not straightforward.
No, it's not.
We know that the risks that, you know, there's every potential that within 30 seconds of launching that somebody will turn it into a pile of rubble. and then go, it's your fault. And we go, no, actually, we've done all the best that we can. So, yeah, there's risks involved.
Now, the thing of on renting, my company also rents the system that is hanging from the drone, and it's a way to expand easily the kind of precautions that we have. We have to train the user on their first rental, and subsequent rentals are not, training is not required because the persons involved are okay with it. And we always, and it's always a matter of measuring the risk and having a good insurance applied to the system. That's very, very critical. We also rent our payloads that stay below the drone or in front of the drone, and it's a good way to expand the any specific applications that your company might have.
And Lewis, do you rent in country or do you send abroad?
We send abroad.
Okay.
But when it's abroad, we have to send a technician with the payloads or the payloads and teach the persons how to operate the payload, because it's a specific gimbal with a series of sensors, cameras, and all that, and has a computer that is also included that communicates with the gimbal. So it's an involved process and the people has to be trained on that. And the trainer that goes to the country knows how to operate and will accompany the person that rents the system on their first operational flight. At least one operational flight, we have one technician present.
Yeah, very wise. Agreed.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Sorry, we might be. I might be being a bit oversensitive in that people have been hiring out aeroplanes to student pilots and junior pilots for years and years and years. This isn't an unusual situation. You know, you'll give the keys to somebody 1 hour past his solo, or not past his solo, but past his jet ride, and off he goes in your aeroplane. So I suppose there is precedent for this, but I guess for all of us who are early adopters, we've come back with the carrier bag of shame on many, many occasions. And we're very well aware of the risk. And I suppose we're moving away from that time now with the technology. I was interested that you said that multi-rotor pilots are just wanting to dabble a little bit with fixed wing. I think that says something as well. That's quite interesting. Are you... have you experienced having, somebody that's only had a multi-rotor training come to you to do their flying to hire yet?
Yes. A lot of people that come to us either to buy or to hire have done multi-rotor, or I should say have multi-rotor experience. It's a different world though. They tend to come with great confidence saying, yes, I've flown my DJI and I can bring it back by switching the transmitter off. And we should be able to fly a fixed wing, no problem at all. Until on, after the end of day one of training or day two of training, and their eyes are about popping out going, my God, I never realized it was as difficult as this, because this thing goes much, much further. And it lands at speed, and all sorts of issues start to come in. Almost having some rotary skills helps more on the legislative side rather than the actual experiential side.
It's interesting because I know there's a shortage of fixed wing pilots in South Africa. There's plenty of multi-rotor. We've got a ridiculous number of multi-rotor operators, but there's hardly anyone's gone for the fixed wing thing.
It's not sexy.
It's
not sexy, and you cannot.
The industry is at last starting to separate the vast difference between multi-rotor and fixed wing. The industry is seeing the benefit of fixed wing clearly, but has not yet assessed the real needs for operators training and capabilities in order to operate fixed wing competently. And along with that, it's like the kind of funding that people expect. They go, well, look, I only need half a day's training with a multi-rotor. Why should I need any more than that for a fixed wing? And I think this understanding is yet to settle in the in the industry in general.
We don't rent the drones. We just rent the payload, and for us is a week's training on how to operate the entire system. And we assume the pilot knows how to fly the drone, although it is not required on our system for him to fly the drone, because the drone, our payload takes over the drone and flies it automatically. But for us is a 1 week, Monday to Friday, of training.
Is that your windmill inspection?
Yeah, the wind turbine blades.
So that payload looks after going up and down the blade and going to each one and doing each thing.
Yeah, and doing the survey with 0.4 millimeters per pixel resolution. And to do that, the drone has to be fly very consistently, and no human pilot can do it.
So that bolts on to. So do you do that with the payload because it's easier to get the payload somewhere than move let's say a Matrice 600 with all the batteries? Because moving the batteries to another country is more of a pain than moving. Is that why you do that?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. The other reason is because it's easier to move an entire system, and it's easier for people. For instance, one company that does aerial photography, they're not always doing aerial photography, and they have the drone stopped for undetermined periods of time. So on that period of time they have the drone stopped, they can do extra work with a specialized payload that will do another vertical market for them. But yes, one of the reasons is all the logistics involved moving a drone from country A to country B. Like this, it's just a small suitcase with a gimbal inside, no batteries included. So you can carry it on hand luggage. It's small enough to be carried on hand luggage. And for instance, we've had already teams going, our own teams that went to operate to some other country. They get to the other country and buy the drone.
Yeah, there you go. Just buy the whole thing when you get. Well, yes, because moving. I don't know those because the batteries in an M600 have got to be.
The M600 batteries are plane friendly, but
are they?
At the time,
okay.
At the time, we were using the S900 and S1000, which have 22,000 milliamp hours batteries, and let's just say shipping via a courier service, it's not very cost effective.
Yeah, makes. I hadn't thought of sensor packages being sent somewhere before till you mentioned it now, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, look, someone else that we've managed to keep quiet for 45 minutes is Bruce. And that's just not on. We've got to bring Bruce into the conversation here. And I know the first thing I need to ask you, Bruce, is the tower still standing? Because south of you, you've got quite some hectic weather at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, and another ex-tropical cyclone. The weather's been pretty crap, actually. So, yeah, but that's like most of the others. It's kind of missed us. We've got the edge of it. And the tower is still standing more by good luck than design. But I want to go back to this agricultural use of drones for a minute, because this is very, very similar to the situation. I've been working in the computer industry since 1977. And in the early 80s, everybody was waiting for the year of the LAN. This year was going to be the year that local area networks became the big thing. And everybody waited and waited and waited. And there was never a year of the LAN. It just gradually people gradually moved to networks, and now, of course, everybody has effectively a local area network with their Wi-Fi system and everything. But there wasn't this sudden jump. It was a gradual, very gradual transition. I think that's what's going to happen with drones in agriculture. At the moment, the applications are there, but the cost efficiency isn't there. But this will change over time, and eventually you'll find, if we go ahead 20 years, drones will be all over farms everywhere. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen in a transitional period. Because one of the things in New Zealand, we're a very strongly agricultural country. There's very little drone use here. A lot of companies out there promoting them. Oh, yes, you can check all your fences and your water troughs from your kitchen table, but it doesn't really happen like that. So, it's just going to take time for that to occur.
Yeah, I've got you remember a couple of weeks ago, I tried counting cows using countthings.com.
Yeah,
and
we've seen that.
Tomorrow at, I think, 0800 GMT, they're going to, well, it won't be live because they're doing a recording of the video, but they've promised me that they fixed that, and I'm going to do a recording with them tomorrow, and they're going to show me how they fix that counting algorithm, which would be very interesting. So so tune in later this week for whenever that comes up, but hopefully they've fixed that, and that is one of the use cases. But of course, I want them to count giraffe and rhino and other things like that.
Okay.
But so if you were to buy into the ag market now, are you buying at peak hype? Is it worth waiting a couple of years? Is it a rich, is it the wrong time to be buying in, Bruce?
Were you talking as a consumer or as someone setting up an agricultural drone business? Yeah, as a consumer. Yeah, it is. I guess it depends very much on the situation. You probably do have dairy farmers here who will happily pay $3,000 or $4,000 for the luxury of checking their fences and water troughs and feed tables from the convenience of their kitchen table while they're having breakfast. But of course, then we've still got this whole regulatory problem that it's all very well and good to have these solutions, but virtually all of them fall outside the regulatory framework. You can't fly beyond visual line of sight. So even if you have a system that will allow you to do what's being claimed, you can't legally use it. So we've still got a lot of catching up to do. I would say to anyone looking at it, yeah, buy one, because the information you glean from hands-on experience, even at a very low level, will pay huge dividends later on when you start to look at spending a lot of money. You'll be in a better position to judge whether the claims are going to be realistic, and you'll know what you're looking for. It's better than going in cold and just taking the brochure at face value.
Yeah, you've done it again. That's the obvious answer. Yes. Well done, Bruce. Yeah, no. So I think it is buying at a low level and consider how useful it might really be to you and your business at the end of the day. But know that at the moment there's a huge amount of hype around precision agriculture. There's a huge amount of hype.
So, Gary, just to jump in, the real problem for us was that these systems were capable of doing agricultural mapping back in, let's say, 2007 already. We could have done agricultural mapping. And because of the FAA putting the brakes on, basically what happened, instead of this market actually developing in a natural manner with slow adoption, what happened is that gave our competitors, at least in China, the time to come up with multi-rotor systems, etc. And then the hype, the hype of this, which I think a lot of people got burned back in 2012, between 2012 and 2014. And now when you go to a farmer, they really want to see how these systems are really going to impact their production. But that said, if you go out and you buy $1,000 system and you go and fly it over a field and you found one problem that you didn't know about, it could save you $10,000. So I agree with Bruce. For users, go out, use the system, become familiar with the technology, and grow into the technology.
Yeah, I think it's the good.
Rory, one quick question. That system from Yamaha, I think, is quite old these days, right?
Yeah.
Is it viable, or is it effective?
I think it's very effective in small acreages. So it was designed, for the Japanese market with small fields. Now you've seen the same thing in China with electric multi-rotors. They're very small fields. So I think it gives you an idea of where it's going. I agree with you. This is going to take, and Bruce, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be 10 years. But I think if they want to make an impact, a real technological impact on agriculture, it's going to be much bigger systems. It's also going to be tied to this whole idea of flying vehicles with cargo, with passengers. It's all going to be a trend towards the future. I think we're gonna see autonomous cargo carrying systems that are going to be adapted for agriculture, etc. I live very close to an airport, and there's a charity that purchases or receives aircraft as donations from pilots. They have over 60 private aircraft parked in their parking lot, which have been donated to them for tax purposes. And this is a trend. Pilots are getting older, they're not flying. America is a great aviation society, but what we're going to see is it's going to transition from manned aircraft to unmanned aircraft. It'll be the Uber of the skies. First cargo, first agricultural applications, industrial applications, and so on. In 10 years, probably in 10, 15 years.
But we can
Rory,
recycle
I need to get Rory to talk to our local council, because we all know what's happening with the airfield here. It's declining. It's being less and less used because manned aviation is in decline. And we've had businesses knocking on the council's door saying, we would like to set up an unmanned aviation business at the airfield. And our idiot councillors saying, oh, no, it's an airfield. It's for manned aircraft. You can't do that. They have no view of the future. They're looking backwards, no vision, no looking forward. There needs to be more awareness of how this transition is happening. And I've crunched the numbers. I've looked at the figures out of the FAA and all the various stuff. And yeah, manned aviation is in quite steep decline, certainly at a recreational level, because of the costs and the regulatory constraints.
Well, let's face it, we can. Archangel, I'll see that little Zoho flying, whatever it's called. I'm getting all the names wrong now. But you put an FPV camera in that, and you can get the experience of flying for $300, and shortly it's all going to be super duper HD. Do you really need to? What's the requirement to fly the aeroplane other than show off? It's
we have an increasing number of people here who were pilots and have now taken up FPV, because, as I say, the only thing I don't get is seat of the pants. Everything else, and I don't risk my life, and it's cheaper, and I can do it whenever I like.
That's right, out the backyard, and away you go. So, maybe that's another reason that all those Cessnas with their 50s engines that no one's going to be making the fuel for them shortly. Mogaz is going away, so they're going to stop working. And it's only going one way, and they've got to get out of the way to free the skies for us.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think that this is the Amazon BS drone delivery to your house. This is more the UPS truck or the FedEx truck that flies to a distribution center in an autonomous manner from hub and spoke type of situations. I think that is going to come.
Well, FedEx are desperate. They're desperate to put something like Alias in all their caravans, or even buy caravans. So they get rid of, and this will create problems for airliners, won't it? Because at the moment, your hour-building young pilot is building hours in the dead of night, flying for FedEx, spoke and hub and wheels and all those other things they say. But they want those to be autonomous. They're desperate for those to be autonomous. And then you're going to have a problem is where the young pilots hour build to become airline pilots. But that's manned aviation's problem, not our problem. The short deliveries. Where I live now, a friend's house is across the way. Across the water to drive to his house is 25 kilometers. I can see his house. It's probably 500 meters away. If I was a farmer and I had both sides of the pond here, I would be wanting to be able to deliver stuff across the water quite easily. No,
what about the rowboat?
Yes, no, the boat would be on the dam. The autonomous boats would be the way to go. Yes, I've got to build one.
You need to speak to John Eaton. Okay, have you heard of John Eaton? Yeah, autonomous boats.
Yes. Well, that's another thing I haven't got time to get into. Look, we're about to come over the hour here. So I suppose this is the time where I have to say Has anything caught anyone's eye in the news this week?
Yeah. We've all seen the situation where an R-22 helicopter crashed because of a drone. We've seen the headlines: drone causes R2 helicopter to crash. I could have a big rant here, but I'll save that for my own channel. But there's some interesting points. It reinforces what I've been saying. It is now time for the regulations controlling manned aviation to be reviewed in light of the fact that we now have so much drone activity. Now, I've done some research on this thing, which most of the newspapers didn't seem to do. Now, this happened at Daniel Island in South Carolina. And so I got on Google Earth and had a look around. And obviously, I checked, there's Charleston International Airport is over 5 miles away. So the drone operator was operating his drone. If there actually was a drone, the operator was operating his drone more than 5 miles from an airport. So he was, following FAA requirements. He was flying at 15 meters if he was at the same height as the helicopter. So again, he was flying below 400 feet in an area where you wouldn't reasonably expect to find manned aircraft. I think the rules generally around the world are manned aircraft 500 feet and above, except on approach or departure or in a designated low-flying area. So the drone operator was doing all the right things. But by the same token, the instructor and the student probably thought they were doing the right thing too. They were practicing hovering well away from other air traffic. But we've got a situation now where I don't think manned aviation can be allowed to do that, because we have a piece of airspace that is increasingly becoming reserved for unmanned aviation. And if a helicopter pilot wants to come and practice his hovering in the middle of a high-risk area where there's a much greater likelihood of drones operating with the endorsement of the regulations, then we're going to have these problems. So I think we have to get more stringent on manned aviation and say, no, I'm sorry, but previously you could dip below 500 when you felt it was convenient to do so. I think now, no, you can't. And the way I see it is, if a manned aviator wants to dip below 500 feet for whatever reason in an area that's not designated for that, they have to file a flight plan in advance so that the UTMs we have can point out to unmanned aviation there's a greater risk factor in this area, or something has to happen. But of course, the whole thing is, did this really happen? Was this really a drone incident? Because if we look at the history of manned aviation, when things go wrong and whatever, I think it could have been a shopping bag. I think it could have been a fruit bat. I think it could have been a ground handling incident. All these things that were supposedly drones turned out to be not. And here's something, I'm not saying this happened, but here's a hypothetical situation. Student and instructor in the helicopter. Student gets way out of shape. Instructor's slow to catch it. Helicopter balls itself up into a little knot of metal. They're lying there in the wreckage, counting their bruises and going, oh, we're in trouble now. What do we do? And one of them says, let's blame it on a drone. Bingo, because there's no independent third-party verification of the claims. There is no wreckage of a drone. There was no contact with the drone. And DJI haven't come along and said, we've got a log of a flight happening in this place at this time. So it really looks bad from so many directions. And of course, the worst thing is the media. The BBC carried the headline, which was a clickbait headline. And that, I just thought, oh no, when that happens, we're doomed. But anyway, that's my...
Well, Nigel is...
it was at that height, it was one of those crazy guys that fly those racing drones, like we see on
Oh no, they said it clearly it was a DJI Phantom 4. How? It must have been really close to determine it wasn't a Phantom 3 or whatever. That's what also adds a lack of credibility. They knew exactly what drone it was while they were busy trying to avoid it. But all the Phantoms look the same to me.
So just like when drone pilots have a problem and they blame interference.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's all
pilots will blame drones, right?
Yeah, it was a sudden gust of gravity.
Yes, I've used that one a lot. But I think this when you say, manned aviation mustn't fly below 500 feet, blah blah blah. I know who'll make sure that'll happen. It'll be Amazon if they really get their UTM ways. Remember that we're trying to monetize that 500-foot space that no one's been interested in this. We're suddenly flying in the valuable airspace. This wasn't valuable before. It's valuable now.
You're going to have a per acre charge, Gary, in 3 dimensions.
Yeah. Well. That's the Lance system will turn into that. It will turn into pay to play to get those things. But Nigel King seeking yellow Sea King helicopters. Not because it's like the Ferrari thing or whatever, but search and rescue. You're the best. You're the most qualified helicopter driver here. Do you have an opinion of that?
I think I'm with you guys. I see a situation where, as you say, possibly a lax instructor has had to suddenly take control of an aircraft that's wobbling around, hasn't done the best job. There may or may not have been a drone there. To me, it's irrespective that he wasn't attentive sufficiently. And you know, even if a DJI hits a helicopter, to be honest, is there going to be that much damage? And I think the reaction time from a helicopter versus a drone would lead me to think that the drone would be out of sight and gone long before they could actually really take any effective evasive action. So my thoughts are, I'd be very suspicious about the story.
And
the big question has to be, would this have happened if there wasn't compulsory drone operator registration in the USA? Was that a primary cause?
Yeah, people are rushing. The headlines are rushing to this, and I do. Yeah, the students have managed to bend the collective or instructors have, trying to lift the collective against what the student was doing. They've bent them in R22s. There's been that much trying to take over. So, yeah, an R22 is a very tricky thing to fly, or can be at the best of times. And when they get out of shape, they get out of shape. And why was he? If he was practicing hovering, why were they? I believe they're over tree. Well, it depends which report you read. But why would you be doing your hover practice over trees unless you're going to a confined area? Perhaps that's all I could think.
That's another thing. Yeah, these reports vary quite a bit. The one I read in the something South Carolina Journal or something or other said they were hovering over deserted land and the tail rotor hit a shrub. So one says trees, one says a shrub. And I looked on Google Earth, and there is an area on the sort of towards the international airport, which looks like a kind of a sandy area with a few clumps of trees and things, little bits of brush. So I think they probably were flying there, which would, to me, would seem to be a perfect place to fly a drone, because you've got good visibility and you're well away from houses and roads and people and buildings. So if there was a drone, the drone guy was doing it right. But unfortunately, under the regulations in almost every country as it stands, it would still be the drone operator's fault, because he was supposed to give way to manned aircraft. That's the big rule. It's like sailing, you always give way to gliders, unpowered aircraft, or unmanned aircraft always give way to powered aircraft. But the problem is that doesn't even fit now, because I was flying in a bush reserve probably about a year ago with my mini quad, and I was flying just below the level of the treetops, and you could see a hole in the canopy if you looked up. We were all sitting there just basically fixing our drones, and an R22 came over at immense speed and just would have been no more than 10 meters above the treetops, and we saw it just flash across the hole in the canopy. Now, if I'd been flying up just above the trees, was away from an airport, I wouldn't have seen or heard that helicopter until it had hit my drone, but it would still be my fault because I didn't give way. So the regulations have to change.
Well, slightly back to the crop dusting thing. There was a crop duster here, and it's also why it's on my mind. It's flying back and forth today, and I was sort of timing how long it took to load up. But because we live on a dam, light aircraft, we see very few light aircraft, but they come through here and they come sightseeing. So there's a light aircraft came through. I may or may not have been listening out on the radio. Nobody was talking on the radio, and he came through. We see maybe, I don't know, 5 aeroplanes a month here. And there happened to be 2 here today, and they got right close to each other just here. No talking, no manned aviation. It's very dangerous, very, very dangerous. Should be stopped. Should be rules against it, Should be rules. Should be rules. That's what you always say, Bruce, isn't it? Anyway, look, it's 8 minutes past. So I think I didn't put that story on SUS News because I don't believe it out of the box. I just don't believe it. It's like that. Do you remember that firefighting one a bit further up the coast? Was it? Can't remember where it was. That's gone away. That was Hanger Rash, the Comanche or whatever that had all the big scars in it. There was all that kerfuffle.
What about the one in Canada that they did actually was investigated? And what annoyed me was that the investigators still attribute it to a drone, although there was no evidence other than some scuffs on the aircraft. And so how can you say it was a drone if you don't have any evidence to support that? That's put a bias there, I think. It was just like our regulator posted that picture of the helicopter exhaust duct being badly dented with a picture of a drone on the ground below, and claimed that was no. The regulators should have no place in this to be biased towards one way or the other. They should be completely objective in the fact that they're not. Something needs to be done.
We'll jump off quickly. I've attended a couple of FAA briefings with regards to drones in the last couple of months, and it's always turned into an us and them type of presentation, pitting manned aircraft against unmanned systems.
But there's more of us now. There's more of us.
No, there's not.
The sky belongs to us now.
The guys that are at the FAAs are ex-pilots or pilots, active pilots. So they have the legislation, and they came here first. So
that's not strictly true. There was the Austrian balloons in about 18 whatever unmanned.
Before that, you had
you did have the Montgolfiers flying first, I suppose. So yeah, all right. Yeah, Aaron, balloon pilots for the win! Hey, all the way. What was I going to say? Oh, it's probably nothing of any consequence, I suppose. And with that thing of no consequence, unless anyone else has anything else to add, any news that anyone's seen this week? Oh, Nigel might have.
Gary, would you like me to finish off with just a little story which probably resounds to everything here? Back in my initial flying days, I was doing an engine off landing, which is you pull the engine back and that's it. You're going no way other than down. And I had my instructor with me, who sadly had a stutter. And after he pulled the engines, he got very distraught. And he was actually saying to me, 50 knots, as he was tapping on the speed indicator. I thought he was saying friction's off.
Oh.
So I released a bit of friction on the collective lever. He kept on tapping on 50 knots, and I thought he was saying friction's off. For the time when he eventually took control at about 10 foot above the ground, there was no airspeed. And when he took control of the collective lever, it was just like a wet lettuce in his hand. And I'm sure it was just the same as the poor R-22 pilot, just completely out of control. So there we go.
No, I agree. Yes.
You'll never be able to monetize this video now, Gary, because you've breached YouTube community standards by making fun of minorities.
I haven't said anything about you in New Zealand yet. Well, I can do now if you want. There you go. What, helicopter pilots are in the minority? I don't get you, Bruce. I don't understand. Anyway, look, this is descending into nonsense as ever. I shan't have it. I have to bring some order to the proceedings.
Yes, that's why we at Ardo Pilots this week had a user starting a series of video tutorials to make you spend some money on model helicopters, right, Gary?
Oh yeah, I know. I'm a bit tempted by that. The RG Pilot helicopter code's got quite mature, and I know what else I need to mention before we go. I need to mention you put that away. I'm not interested. Put that away. Yeah, I don't care. Patrick Egan is running for AUVSI president, so vote Patrick if you're in America. What have you got there? Don't say it's a book because you can't read. It's a pixel. Oh, look at that. Oh, well, you're not going to get that in your sub 250 gram machine. Did you see, Bruce, the guys at the Unconference in Canberra flew a sub 100 gram wing?
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yes. With a strict.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So I've got several of them.
Yeah, but flying with missions and all that, one of those big planes.
Oh no, I don't need someone to hold my hand when I'm flying. I'm good.
It was 97 grams, I think, completely autonomous, but it won't fly. It won't fly manually. It can't fly with a man in a loop. And I think wasn't it 18 meters a second? It has to fly around.
Yeah.
For 20 minutes, which is amazing.
And it cannot fly manually because it doesn't have enough power to power RC receiver.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was just.
So how do they legally test that? Because I think most countries require that you fly with the ability to take manual control. Otherwise, it's
you
no
fly
longer
it manually. You fly it manually via other ways on
the ground station.
Yeah. It's different.
Just trust you to bring the laws into this, Bruce. You captain of industry and rules and regulations. And I should say, I know what else I need to know.
By the way, we have to launch the campaign. We are going to do a worldwide campaign to Bruce to be the new mayor of wherever he lives in New Zealand.
I'm not going to the dark side, Louis. I'm not going to the dark side.
No, you're not going to the dark side. You'll take light to the dark side.
And I should say, as we close, don't forget our show's coming up in San Francisco on April the 25th, and the live flying day from Treasure Island. I love that we picked that place. Is on the 26th of April with no cages. They are uncaged drones. So I've done my bit. I've done my advert bit. Guys, thanks very much. Thanks very much, dear viewer, wherever you've been in the world, for watching. Have a lovely rest of the week, and I hope your weekend goes well. Don't forget, join us again, 2100 GMT next Tuesday for more nonsense. And as I say, the cow counting people are speaking to me tomorrow. So we'll find out if that works or that doesn't work. Nigel, I'm looking forward to hearing what's going on with you in the future. Rory, I am going to check back in for some more farming stuff for sure. And Louis, I don't know what you do. I'll see you, mate. And I'll see you, Bruce. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks to you, viewer. Bye-bye.
Bye.